Hey everybody, well there's a bit of a nip in the air. Autumn is definitely here and winter will be on its way, so it's a good time of the year to check your bike over, do an autumn-winter check and just make sure you're all safe and good for the winter time. Particularly important in the winter obviously because the conditions are bad, but it's always a good thing to once or twice a year check your bike over. So I'm making this video so you can follow along and see the sorts of things that I do. I'm going to do it to my Yamaha XJ6 2010. But the first thing I need to do is give it a wash. It's important to give it a wash first so you can see like if there's any damage or anything to be seen. Also to clean your chain off, to check the condition of that, you really need to clean it. Right, well let's get on with this. But one tip I'm going to give you, if you have the space, when you wash your bike, do it in a different place to where you're going to work on it, and that way you won't have to kneel in water afterwards. I'm just going to put it on a rear stand because that'll make it a lot easier to clean the chain and stuff. Double, triple check, we good? Yep. Solid. Unfortunately, because this is not a supermoto, I can't just throw a bucket of water at it. I'm actually going to have to do a proper job. But I'm not going to go into great detail here because there is so much choice in this. But my general method is wet the bike over to let all the dirt soften up, use some warm water and soap to help clean that off with a sponge, rinse the bike off, job's a good one. You may also notice that I was running the engine to do a couple of steps where I was cleaning out the dirt, but I wasn't touching anything on the wheel as it was running. Don't do that, you'll lose fingers. I'm just giving this a very quick chain adjustment because it's always good to do. I've checked the chain over for stiff links and things like that, and it seems in absolutely great condition. So I've cleaned it off, and then once it's dried a little bit, I'll get some lube on it. Keep in mind I have lots of videos about how to do mechanical things on bikes. Pretty much if you ask for it, I've already got a video on it, including doing chain adjustments like this. If you are paying a garage to do a chain adjustment for you, unless it's for the warranty, you are throwing money away. Plus it means your sprockets and that live longer if you adjust it regularly and on time, rather than, you know, maybe leaving it a bit too long waiting to have it done because you're going to pay for it. Click. Right, time to put it back on the stand. The reason I took it off with the chain adjustment is you should adjust it with the bike on the ground because the weight of the bike plus the rider needs to be checked. Okay, now I need to lube the chain up. Again, this is a time that I will use the engine running because it helps get the lube into all of the nooks and crannies, plus more evenly distributed. Again, don't get your fingers near it. Dangerous things are dangerous. Obviously it's up to you what method of chain lubing you use, dry or wet, waxes, sticky ones, non-sticky ones, automatic ones, you know, there's lots of different options. I use one which is an all-purpose, all-weather chain lube, which is quite sticky, and I don't mind putting a bit of it on because I know once it flashes off and it sits there, it's not going to fling off. And you've seen, that chain looked rank and it's come up perfect, and that's because it's been coated in grease this whole time. If you clean it so it's bare metal and you do the lightest lubing, unless you're someone who just uses your bike in the dry, you're going to get rusts really quick. Consider what I'm saying in this video is what I do rather than what to do. Yeah, as the winter comes up, I tend to protect the bike with some sprays and I don't clean it much. And as for the chain, I might give it a quick clean, as in a wipe off, but I tend to want to leave as much grease on there or as lube as I can to protect it over the winter. You don't get stuck links that way, and that's the #1 killer of chains in my experience, which comes from corrosion. Obviously we've had a lot of oil and stuff spraying around here, so I'm using some brake cleaner on the brake discs and a piece of kitchen roll that's clean, just to make sure that if there's any grease on here, any oil that's sprayed, we get it off. Plus it's also good to clean your discs occasionally. Okay, so the chain is all done, we know that's done now. The brake on the rear, we've cleaned the disc. I don't need to touch the fluid in that because I only changed it a little while ago, but if you haven't changed your brake fluid for a long while, it absorbs water over time, it becomes less effective, and you can get all sorts of problems from this. It's a good idea to change that brake fluid. But obviously I will be checking the fluid in the front brakes because they're your main safety feature and far more important. So then there's tyres we need to talk about. Don't make sure that your tyres are within legal spec, because just borderline legal tyres have very little grooves left in them to displace water, and obviously in the winter that's really important. Rain, wet mud and leaves and stuff, you need somewhere for that water and that goo to escape so you get some contact with the road. These are some Dunlop Sports Maxes, which are kind of intermediate, and they seem to be pretty good in the wet, so I'm happy with these. And there is a decent amount of tread left in these, but I think these will be gone by the summer, and I'll have to get some nice fresh tyres on for summertime. So as I say, I know my brake fluid is relatively new, but I am just going to give it a little look. I can't see much on the spyglass, but the spyglass on this isn't great. Note, a little bit of copper slip on these screws means they never get stuck. So yeah, that fluid looks nice and clear. It's not gone too dark or anything like that. It doesn't look in any way dirty, and there's plenty of it, so I'm happy to just pop that back on and leave it as it is. If it does look dark or discoloured, then you definitely want to change it. You want to flush it out. If you are doing that and you haven't done it for a long time, it may be time to consider servicing the calipers themselves, taking them off, giving them a clean up. I've got videos from cleaning calipers all the way until completely rebuilding them, including master cylinders, and of course bleeding the brakes. So if you want to see that, look at my playlists. I tell you what, I'll link the playlists at the end you want to check out. There's so much stuff in there that will help you if this is new to you, or you want to just double check. Brakes on the front and some other things you need to check. Obviously I haven't mentioned about pads with the rear brakes. The reason I didn't mention that is because I'm about to, plus I know they're okay in the rear, so I didn't need to check them because they're new. However, just like with the rear ones, you should give the front ones a clean using some brake cleaner. Okay, they're going to need a bit more of a clean actually, and I'm going to need to move the bike backwards and forwards, so I'll do that in a minute. I don't want to move the camera basically. Right, so let's talk about the things you need to check. Obviously you've checked the brake fluid and that's all good. Make sure you've got no leaks at your banjo bolts or anywhere like that. Check your brake pads. If you have to take the caliper off to have a look. But if you can, most bikes you can look down in and see the wear marks in the brake pad, which is like a little square cutout. If your brake pad is level with the cutout, they're done. The next thing you need to check is wear evenness. Make sure there's no obvious big deep gouges out anywhere. I can actually notice the bike seems to be braking slightly harder on this inner edge here, but it is pretty smooth. It's not too much of an issue. The other thing is the minimum thickness of your brake disc. Somewhere on the brake disc, a measurement will be marked, which is the minimum thickness of the disc. Now you can measure this using a pair of calipers or verniers. If yours don't have a cutout at the bottom to account for the lip, because the problem is there's a lip forms on the outside, and if you measure that, you'll get a totally wrong reading for what the disc actually is. If yours don't have that cutout, a way of getting around this is you get two nuts, you measure the two nuts, so you know the size of that, then you put a nut either side in the middle, you then measure over those two nuts, and then take away the measurement of the nuts, and that'll give you the measurement of the disc. If you had digital calipers, you'd obviously measure these and then you'd discount that by zeroing them. So make sure your brake discs are the right thickness, make sure they're clean, make sure the brake fluid's good, make sure the brake pads are good, and make sure they're working. If something doesn't feel like it's working right, look into it. It might be the master cylinder needs rebuilding or something like that. So that's your chain, brakes and tyres. Notice how that's all about your connection to the road, your stopping and the going. It's all very important on the bottom end. I got my front stand out because it made cleaning the discs a lot easier. Okay, so we need to check the lights, indicators, front, rear, and again, rear and front on the other side. So they're working, no problem. Right, pop the hazards on, just make sure they're actually flashing like they should be. Yes. So then we need to check brake lights. Is the running light on? Yes. Is the brake coming on? Yes. Try with the rear. Yes, so that's all good for that. Number plate illumination light is on and working, and that is a legal requirement, so make sure you've got it working. And now I need to start the bike to check the front headlights. So, low beam, high beam, low beam, pass light. Okay, so next up, what does the engine need? Well, oil and coolant. Particularly coolant in the winter is important, because remember, it's not just cooling in the summer, it's an anti-freeze, and that's kind of more important. But yeah, so oil. If you haven't changed it for a while, change it. I have done mine recently, but I am about to do a check on this bike to just make sure, see if it needs topping up or not. The way you check your oil obviously is dependent on what bike you have, so check your user's manual to see how you do that. With this bike, it's a case of like running it for 3 minutes, then waiting for a few minutes, then dipping it and checking, and then adjusting from there. I use a magnetic kitchen timer. It helps keep my towel there for when I want to dip check it. Also remember that you do not want to rev the bike in this stage. Do not do that because you'll fling oil everywhere and you'll get an inaccurate reading. This is also a good time to just sit and listen to the engine, to listen to any weird ticks or rattles. Don't get too paranoid about it, but if you know the sound of your engine, you can hear when things go wrong or if something's not quite right. You also need to know whether you have to screw your dipstick back in to get a reading or whether you just place it in. Normally it's a case of place it in. And also the bike needs to be on level and stable ground. Not stable, but level. Yep, that's absolutely fine. It's right up to the line, but I think that's because this bike isn't actually completely straight right now. Yeah, the front wheel's very slightly higher up than the rear because it's on these stands, but yeah, as I say, I know when I put that in and I'm happy with it. So coolant, if you have a water-cooled bike, you need to make sure it's got enough coolant in it and also that it's new enough that it's going to be effective. It's going to be very difficult for me to show you this. There is a filler cap on my radiator down in here. Basically that is screwed into the filler cap of the coolant to stop it undoing itself. I got the cap off and the coolant level is perfect, so we don't need to do anything with that. And I know it's new enough that it doesn't need replacing. So there we go, we've given the bike a clean, we've checked the chain, it's got no stuck links, no corrosion that's a problem. The adjustment on it is good and I've got adjustment left so I don't need to replace those. My chain and my sprockets look good because they were replaced at the same time. Tyres are looking good. Brake pads, brake discs, checked them all, cleaned them, they're all good. Brake fluid looks good and the levels look good. Front brakes are all good, lights are working, bike's got enough coolant and oil. That's basically it. Well, of course, now you've got the level of protecting sprays and stuff. Obviously, I still need to polish this with just some basic polish to keep the dirt off the paintwork and it helps make the water run off. And then in the wintertime, as I say, I spray on protecting sprays. You can get different multi-purpose sprays, but things like GT85 are good as to give a sort of a protection layer, a bit of Teflon in between to help get the dirt off. And then any of the other metal parts that need protecting, you can use things like ACF 50. And that's basically it. There's a few things to do, it's not too bad, but the most important part is to make sure you have a good connection to the road, i.e. tyres, and a good way of stopping, i.e. brakes. So there you go. If you want to know any more, or any more in-depth parts about things, as I say, I've got videos on completely rebuilding brakes. I have videos about doing chain adjustments and why chains snap, changing chain and sprockets and stuff like that, changing basically everything. I have a video on it that's much more in-depth. This is supposed to be sort of a cover-all to make sure that you're hitting all the marks. And also as a reminder. I mean, I may have even forgotten a couple of things if people want to drop in the comments with some bits you check, but generally they're the bits that I check. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please smack that like button. A huge thanks to my Patreon supporters. If you want to become a Patreon supporter, please consider doing that. It's as little as $1 a month, well, £1 a month. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.